So ever since the Nintendo Switch launched back in March of 2017, I think it is a safe statement to say that Nintendo has shown a ton of love and care to numerous different IP and franchises that they have created over the years with recent installments released on the Nintendo Switch hardware. However, in today's video, I want to focus on at least 3 different forgotten franchises that I am very ready to see come back in the modern era, boot up some of the classic installments from these forgotten IP, and have that broad discussion on whether or not we can expect these games to come back in any form or fashion to the Nintendo Switch in 2022 or beyond. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. As I mentioned, guys, we're doing a little bit different video today and discussing some long forgotten IP and franchises that Nintendo, we know they have access to them. We know that at any given time they could choose to bring them back to modern hardware, but we have not seen that love and support that we've seen like many other franchises given on the Switch, such as Kirby most recently, getting numerous releases one after the other. And I, for one, am ready for certain series such as Star Fox here to come back in a big way in the modern era. And so that's kind of what I want to do today, is boot up just a few installments out. It doesn't mean that these are the ones that exactly I want to have come over, but Star Fox Assault I didn't think was a bad game, and I honestly probably didn't give it enough of a future run through and look back at it, because, you know, the space action combat that Star Fox 64 actually created and really put on the map for Star Fox games, or I guess you couldn't say created since we did have Star Fox on the SNES, of course. But, you know, I think that style really found its groove in Star Fox 64. And then you have this that kind of did a mixture of that same kind of gameplay. Now, there will be fans of Star Fox Adventure style more, where it's more of like that, you know, on the ground adventure as opposed to the space shooter style. I personally am a fan of a mix of both. Like, if we have aspects that are in space like this that make you feel like, yes, this is a Star Fox game through and through, and then you also have aspects where you are on the ground traversing and figuring out puzzles more akin to what Star Fox Adventure was, I think a best of both worlds scenario really works for this game in my personal opinion. But it's one that, you know, I think it just sells on the Switch. I know that the Nintendo's strategy with a lot of these forgotten franchises, at least in my opinion, is, well, don't bring them back until you really have a good idea for them, or if it's just guaranteed money and they know it'll sell. And of course, your Marios and your Zeldas and even your Kirbys are more consistent performers than something like Star Fox has been over the years, especially with the EU release of Star Fox Zero. That one definitely not doing anything good in the sales number department. So, you know, you can still find unopened copies of Star Fox Zero from the Wii U. And I think that there's just, Nintendo didn't quite have their marketing figured out for titles back then like they do today, and there's definitely some complaints on the controls and different aspects of that game, so maybe it wasn't the best project through and through. But I think if we saw Nintendo give some of these franchises the same push, you know, on Twitter that we saw them do with things like Metroid Dread, the same kind of release trailer, you know, reveal different gameplay aspects like we've seen them do with Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and then, you know, that like we'll see them do soon with Splatoon 3, Nintendo has really hit their groove with how to market these games. And when you have an install base as powerful as you do on the Switch, fastly approaching 110 million, we'll actually have brand new numbers from Nintendo very shortly because they have their quarterly financial investor briefing coming up. It's a different era right now on the Switch, and if there ever was a console generation to build out all the way and definitively set, like, yes, this is the best home console collection of total games from Nintendo, I think you do it in the Switch era. And especially if we're talking about maybe some kind of more powerful Pro model before the end of the life cycle. Nintendo has stated in numerous investors meetings that they want the Switch's life cycle to last, you know, or that it's in its halfway point. That doesn't mean we're necessarily another 5 years out from new hardware, but rather that's how long they can see the thing selling alongside of potentially whatever is next. So if we are on the ride for another 3 years, I think we have to see some of the love from games like Star Fox amongst others. And with that, I will transition straight into the next game so we don't spend just too much time on this one. But Star Fox Assault, a good one that holds up just to boot up. And remember, you know, like some of the classic elements of Star Fox gameplay, definitely one that I would even take as a port, but hopefully we just see something new from Star Fox on the Switch Starlink, for the record, and if anybody wants to say in the comments that that's the Star Fox, that's like a cameo appearance from Star Fox. We have not gotten a true Star Fox experience on the Switch like we need to see. So with that, we'll transition into the next game on today's list. Now, next up on our list is none other than F-Zero GX, aka one of my favorite racers of all time. I definitely think that GX was the pinnacle of the series. We're getting a little bit of lag with the emulation. I did that for ease of capture, and also just so it looks better. You can up-res everything, and it definitely, like, these GameCube games with up-res definitely hold up good, but you do have a couple hiccups every now and then when you first load them up. So I will say for this, the F-Zero GX, absolutely the pinnacle of the series, and one that you could just port. And you may remember, if you've been around on the channel and been keeping up with everything in the rumor mill speculation talk, this one is in the rumor mill speculation talk right now because there are some people in the industry, or leakers known as Silex Hunter, referencing something F-Zero and Nintendo being in the works right now. And the specific thing that was referenced in a tweet was you got boost power, which is a direct quote from F-Zero GX, basically insinuating that is F-Zero GX going to get brought over? That's a very real possibility as a port, and I think that would be the smart way to do it, because you're not developing a new game from the ground up and risking very much in the way of a high budget with the game, and you're going to see if there is a market for this to sell alongside of games like Mario Kart, which I just think, like, even though it's Nintendo's big racer, this has such a different vibe and different spot than Mario Kart. And, you know, you're not trying to get items, you're doing strategic, like, very fast-paced quick turns and things. Like, it is a different gameplay style at its core, and I think that there's going to be a whole section of people who would pick this up and play it separately, especially, gosh, 24th. I mean, look at the difficulty on this thing. Granted, I'm a little bit rusty at it, but I do think that it's one of those games that, if given a modern chance, could very much succeed on the Switch. And, you know, especially if they just want to do F-Zero GX, with you look at the things like the upscale, this game looks fine. A lot of the games from the GameCube era, because it was Nintendo's really last generation, I guess you could say, of trying to compete on power against the other guys, it is one of those things that if you just brought back many games from the GameCube era and just gave them an HD up-res and just some basic texture enhancements, you're going to be able to port these directly onto the Switch with minimal work. Everything's going to work just fine, because of course we're playing with button controls on the GameCube, so no weird like motion redesign that needs to be done like you would with Wii ports. And, you know, you test out the waters with bringing back some of these franchises in the port first off, and then ultimately you give them a brand new from the ground up installment later on if that port does succeed and you've proven that there is a fan base for it. Because the crazy thing to talk about 20 years in the past is, you know, that's a whole new generation of gamers at this point that have grown up that maybe were never around to experience these games when they first released. And so, you know, I think that Nintendo shouldn't just totally forgo these franchises just because they're not guaranteed, you know, Mario style money printers as far as mainstream sales go. Like, yes, there can be a market for this today. And so, you know, another game that, give us GX first, because I honestly do think that this is just a masterpiece as is and can be brought over very simply as a port, and then do an installment after that. So that rounds out like the number 2 pick for me, which of course there's plenty of franchises we won't get to today. And number 3 on the list that we're about to hop to is arguably, you can say it's maybe not its own franchise, but for the sake of the list and wanting to boot it up, I'm going to argue that it is one. But, you know, it's something that yes, we can see more love and support than we have for many of these classic library of games that Nintendo could just write the checks, throw them out there on the 100+ million install unit base of the Switch. And I think that games like F-Zero and games like the next one we're going to boot up will absolutely sell in the modern era. So with that, we'll transition into number 3 and our final game we're going to boot up and play through together today on today's list. Now, finally closing out our list today is none other than Diddy Kong Racing, which, as I mentioned, you can argue is technically part of the Donkey Kong franchise, since Diddy Kong is that character. But I would argue that this is such a different experience, of course, than what you get on something like Donkey Kong, that we need to see it brought back in the modern era. And I definitely think that this is one that would resonate very well with the Switch audience. And I do think also that while it is much more akin to Mario Kart, which like we were talking about F-Zero GX not being that similar to Mario Kart, this one's definitely more of a similar experience than Mario Kart. I will give you that. However, I do also think there's something to be said for the adventure aspect of this game and the way that you're connected in different levels, even different kart types ultimately with things like the hovercraft and the airplane later on. Like, you have such different gameplay experience through and through with it. And then you also have things like boss battles, and you have really just at the end of the day a very unique gameplay style that I don't think we've really seen Nintendo ever attempt or go back to. Of course, I am actually playing this on the DS version of it, which is a remake of this title that came out later on. I'll even take the Nintendo Switch Online N64 game for now. That's perfectly fine. It's just a franchise that I hope that, you know, Nintendo one day realizes, well, you know what, that Diddy Kong Racing was pretty awesome, and if we did that with, you know, online co-op play in the modern day, I think that could be a really cool experience. Give us crazy boss battles, give us all types of different terrain to experience, and go, you know, revitalize what I think is a fantastic franchise and a fantastic attempt at a kart racer from Diddy Kong himself. So we'll end the video here, guys. I want to hear from you at this point in the video. Clearly, there's many other franchises we didn't mention today. Punch Out, Kid Icarus, I mean, so many different ones. 1080 snowboarding. I would love to see many of these franchises make it back in a big way in the modern era on the Switch, and even just have brand new from the ground up. It can create experiences with entirely new IPs, but specifically where I want to hear from you guys in today's video is, how do you feel about some classic franchises making their way back to the Switch? Do you think that we see continued support for new attempts at F-Zero, Star Fox, and even Diddy Kong Racing, or other ones that we didn't talk about today? Do you think Nintendo gives us another shot at those around the corner, or do you think that it's something that we may just see more and more Kirby's and Mario's and Zelda's, which are obviously all great games also, but where do you think Nintendo leads us from here? Do you think that we do get a lot of these classics revived and re-brought over, or is Nintendo Switch Online and the growing library of consoles really probably going to be the only way we ever end up playing these classics once again? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, where we discussed the surprise announcement around a Pokemon Presents planned for this week, as well as a interesting rumor that's been making the rounds online suggesting that Nintendo may be planning a 5G model of a Nintendo Switch Lite. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.